It's always good fun to be at this event and to be at any event with the International Economic Forum of the Americas. And they continue to grow and find new interesting ways to bring people together to talk about important subjects. So I'm looking forward to Phoenix. DBRS Morningstar is a global credit rating agency founded and headquartered right here in Toronto, with offices in New York, London, Frankfurt, Madrid, and Mumbai. We employ just under 800 people on our team. Our company provides credit ratings and analysis, expert opinions and commentaries on over 46,000 securities around the world issued by governments and other public institutions, insurance companies, financial institutions, corporations, infrastructure and project finance issuers, and a variety of structured finance entities. Our work is valued by global investors and debt issuers and covers all fixed income asset categories such as public and private debt, commercial paper, subordinated debt, mortgage, and asset-backed securities. We are part of Morningstar, Inc., the world's leading provider of independent equity research, ratings, and investor tools, as well as mutual fund analysis, all designed to empower investor success. I believe most generations feel they live in times of unprecedented challenges, and ours is no different. Whether it's rising interest rates for the first time in many people's working lives, growing uncertainty due to armed conflicts, trade disputes, and inflation, a looming recession in many parts of the world, the existential threat brought by a rapidly changing environment, or the unforeseen impacts of artificial intelligence and machine learning. All of which brings us to our keynote luncheon speakers, which Catherine will be introducing shortly. Both of our guests have unique insights into many of these investment challenges, and I know I speak for all of you in saying how much I look forward to their remarks and their perspectives. Please enjoy your lunch.
Nicolai, thank you so much for being here with us.
Pleasure.
Welcome to Toronto and welcome to Canada, although very similar to your country.
Yes, that's right.
So you lead one of the largest capital pools in the world. What parts of your background prepared you for this incredible responsibility and job?
Well, I think I've been working with money my whole life in a way, and I do what I've always done, just with a few more zeros behind, and whether you run a billion or a trillion, it's not so very different. It's about taking the risks. It's about seeing opportunities, trying to learn from mistakes, and work with the stakeholders.
And in all these years, what have you learned about yourself? When you were working at a hedge fund and now here, are there new discoveries that you've had about yourself in this new experience?
Yeah, I think the biggest discovery is that to be a good investor, you need to be really stubborn to a point. But when things change, you need to change your mind. And to really try to work on that combination is really, really important. Because if you have this square and you have right, wrong, consensus, non-consensus, all the money is if you are right in a non-consensus way. That's where all the money is. And that's where I live. And it's a terrible square to live in.
Because it's lonely sometimes.
It's very lonely. And I kind of think, life is not a popularity contest. And then my wife says, well, only people with old friends say that. But that's the way you have to think as an investor, I think.
And so your mandate as an organization is very long-term, right? Because it's the sovereign wealth fund of the Norwegian people. How do you know that you're doing a good job?
Well, so the thing with investing, as you all know, is that you can do a great job, but the results are not coming that year or the year after, right? So it's one of the few disciplines where in the short term, there is very little correlation between your process and the outcome. Whilst in the long term, there is a huge correlation. So you need to focus in on process and try to measure process. And then hopefully within 2 to 3 years, the results will come.
What are some of the process tricks that you'd recommend? There are a lot of asset managers and a lot of corporate leaders in this room. What types of processes have you found to be most effective in building your business?
Well, the most important thing in investing is try to learn from your mistakes. And of course, we all hate to look at our mistakes. It's really, really painful. But we have made this investment simulator where we take all the data from all our portfolio managers and we have it up in the cloud. And when you Paul, want to, for instance, buy $1 million worth of Apple, before you manage to press buy, it will tell you, Paul, you have never made money in Apple. It's now November and you have lost money 11 months in a row. And historically, that has been really bad for your decision making. It's 9 a.m, you make more money at 3 p.m. It's a consensus stock, you are better at contrarian. And so you get all this stuff fed back to you. And you have to process that before you are actually able to trade.
Wow, so you have a pretty big data team, you know, analyzing all. How big would your data team be?
Well, we have in data and operation, we have 200 people. But I mean, we are very lean as an organization. So we are roughly a third of what the Canadian funds would be. We have only 600 people, but a couple of hundred of those would be in IT. And nearly all the people we hire now would have some kind of IT background.
Now, that difference in team composition, you've historically not done a lot of direct private equity and direct private assets, right? Versus the Canadian plans, I'd say someone was telling me some of them are 60% now privates and trying to do more and more directs. Why has that asset allocation mix been different?
Well, so I would say it's been a big mistake. Okay. We in the fund have wanted to do it for 20 years. The politicians don't want it, and the Minister of Finance have not wanted us to do it. And in Scandinavia, you have this really, really extremely strong focus on costs. So they are super happy that we have the lowest costs in town, right? We have such low costs, no secretaries, no nothing, right? But we also have lower returns. But they are not so fussed about that.
Fascinating. I mean, it's interesting how the cultures are different in those
Well,
ways.
it's just like in Scandinavia. It doesn't matter that you are poor as long as nobody else gets rich. And so you don't want the PE guys to just take a lot of fees. Now, we want to change this. We have proposed a change and the ministry is looking at this. So we hope to be able to do it because we have left a lot of returns on the table here.
Big opportunity. Another major change in the investing environment is the whole concept of social responsibility. And you have many layers of social responsibility because you're also, you know, very few people can say, I represent a country. And in many ways, you fly the Norwegian flag everywhere you go. How do you think about that social responsibility in terms of your social responsibility to Norway, but also your global responsibility as an organization?
Yeah, it's a big question, right? But for us to invest, we have to represent Norwegian values, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have any credibility in the country. And Norwegian values are, you know, it's equality, it's very, very strong ESG focus, it's gender balance and these kind of things, and that's what we advocate. Now, on the climate side, we've been very vocal for a long time, you know, for 15 years or more. And the fact that our view is so anchored and embedded in the parliament means that we can continue to be very strong advocates for this, even when the world is going in another direction, because we don't have any clients, right? So if you are Larry Fink and you need to be a bit more careful because your clients are leaving you, we don't have to think that way.
And so one of the things I've noticed is that you've mandated every company that you invest in to have a net zero objective by 2050. What drove that mandate? And do you think it makes sense?
I think it makes absolute sense. Now, if you go back 10 years, you could argue that the link between climate and finance was not so straightforward. Over the last 10 years, it's increasingly clear that the climate is hitting food prices, you know, because harvests are worse. And we are seeing it now in orange juice, coffee, sugar, rice. You're seeing it all over the place. And so it's really a financial risk. Now, what you've seen over the last couple of years is also that productivity is going down because of the heat and the floods and so on. And so that is also impacting inflation. And so it is really one of the big threats to the values of the fund, which is why we really have to care about it.
And, you know, a lot of companies have signed up, you know, for the net zero asset management pledge, things like this, but are now realizing, wow, in order to get there, might be impossible. How do you think about, companies that have signed these agreements, but they're probably never going to achieve what they've signed?
Yeah. First of all, we didn't actually sign it because we thought it could be problematic, and also we feel that we are pretty big on our own. So hopefully the companies will listen to us, even if we are not part of a big group. Now, 2050. Why did we choose 2050? Well, because it was so far out that nobody particularly cared, right? It's kind of easy to sign 2050 because 2050 there is no way you are going to be around in your job. No, but that's just the way it is.
Because I mean, it's challenging because if you think about the electrification of even like Canada, the power infrastructure that needs to be built in order to do that, if to achieve a 2030 target, you should have started, 4 years ago. And last time I checked, we're not building any new nuclear plants, for example. And so how are you advising? Because one of the things you do is you advise a lot of these companies on how to do. What are, the 3 things you try and get people to do in order to at least show progress towards those objectives, even though they won't be around in 2050? I probably will, but
I mean, we work with regulators and standard setters. That's one way to lift everything. Reporting is very, very important, and so we are very strong at getting better reporting. And what we see is that the companies which report on climate goals also achieve more. We are seeing that pollution from companies which have clear goals is going down. Pollution from companies which don't have a clear goal actually is going up.
As they say, measure what matters. Yeah. You talk a lot about corporate transparency. What does that mean? And when you engage with companies around transparency, what clearly there's more transparency around climate objectives, but what are the other kind of transparency areas of focus that you have?
Yeah, I mean, my mind, transparency is just completely key to everything we do. And it is, of course, mirroring the kind of Scandinavian attitude generally that everything should be very, very transparent. I think it's easier to improve when you are transparent. Everything is working towards the same goal. Now, we've been working really hard on transparency, and we well, I shouldn't be saying this since I'm in Canada, but we actually got the prize for the most transparent fund in the world. Now, in the past, that was Canadian funds, and we think it's okay to be beaten by the Canadians in ice hockey, but not in transparency. So,
although you guys have us in cross-country skiing.
Yeah.
In terms of portfolio construction, when you think about the size of your public book, how have you thought about active versus passive? Because when you're managing $1 trillion in public markets, are you even able to beat the markets or create alpha?
Yes, we have created 25 basis points outperformance since we started per year in 27 years. So we are tweaking out some excess returns, but it's not a massive amount. I would say 80% of our equities is passive, and we are kind of advanced indexed. 20% is more active. Now the thing is, in this job, how much different from the index can you be and still keep your job? I think I can lose in dollar terms, $20 billion. I'll probably still have a job. But if we were like 30, 40 out, I'll be shot.
So you got to be very careful about your track and error.
So that's why from a governance point of view, it makes sense to index a lot of your money. Otherwise, the governance structure can't really take it.
One of the incredible things about your role is the breadth of, it's, I don't know, in Lord of the Rings, that eye that sees everything. But, from your standpoint, you're kind of the eye that sees everything because you're in so many companies. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in the kind of global corporate world that you think are most exciting?
Well, I wish I could see all these things, but the one thing that struck us a few years ago was that we just saw inflationary pressure everywhere. And I was just amazed that the central banks didn't start a lot earlier to tighten. And we could discuss why there wasn't, but there was some clear decision-making mistakes. And when we spoke to central banks, we asked them, hey, don't you speak to companies? And many of them have a policy of actually not speaking to corporates, which makes no sense to me. So the inflation has been strong and it has continued. Just what we're hearing just now is that there is perhaps more deflation come out of China than I had expected, because demand is quite low, and so prices are being lowered significantly. I think that could be a really new important thing. Now we are seeing AI. What is that doing to inflation? Well, we have a podcast in the fund called In Good Company. Has anybody listened to it? Hey, what's wrong with you guys? We have a podcast, and since we have so big ownership stakes, we managed to speak to the biggest CEOs in the world, right? So we have Bill Gates, Goldman's, GE, L'Oreal, AMD, all these people on it. Now we had Sam Altman on it a few weeks ago, and I asked him how we have a goal in the fund to become 10% more effective and efficient because of AI. And I asked him, hey, what do you think about that? And he said, no, you should be 20% more efficient over the next 12 months. So it has potentially huge implications for productivity, right? I mean, this is real stuff. And so that's probably the biggest positive I see now.
For those who don't know Sam Altman, he founded OpenAI.
Yeah.
You've been outspoken on the ethics of AI and the importance of transparency. How do you do that as a corporate when, for many people, these models are kind of black boxes, and it's very hard for corporations who the AI skill sets are in such short supply. It's not obvious for corporates to really understand whether the models they're using are ethical or not. What advice are you giving to people around that?
So that's the problem, right? That it is very, very tough to know. So the first thing for us is that it is the responsibility of the board. They really are responsible. It needs to be transparent, and it needs to be explainable. So these are kind of the three important things. Are we going to get good regulation here? I'll be surprised. I think it's very, very difficult, because AI now is such an integral part in the weapon fight between America and China. It's in self-driving cars. It's in the pharmaceutical industry. It's just everywhere, and it's so embedded into that whole geopolitical tension that I'd be surprised if we got proper regulation here.
And what are the risks that worry you the most about a lack of understanding of AI models and their implementation in corporates?
I don't think I have any original things there. That has to do with bias, control, human intervention, and so on. But we don't know where China is. I asked Sam Altman about it. He said we have no clue where they are. And suddenly they do things. Suddenly they come up with some kind of supersonic rocket that we didn't even know they had. Today I saw they just launched a new quantum computer, and how much faster that it was than the previous model. Well, 1 million times faster, right? And so it's just, these leaps are gigantic.
And how do you position your portfolio for these leaps, right? Because with the acceleration of innovation, it's the risk of disintermediation and being technologically having a large tech debt, as they say in the tech world, is really high. How do you think about that?
Well, you have to try to avoid the losers, and you have to try to be with the winners, but it's a really, really tough. So I kind of think you just have to be in the whole market there. And we saw during the first half of the year, we made $50 billion in the 7 biggest tech names in America, right? It's not easy to predict who will be the winners here. So I think you just want to participate in the whole thing.
That's fascinating. And in terms of your organization, do you have like a central, one of the things that a lot of Canadian pension plans are struggling with is how do they get information flow on certain of these topics throughout their organization? Because people, for example, who've done credit their whole lives are probably not thinking a lot about AI, or even people that have done private equity their whole lives are probably not. And how do you get that information flow and those insights from one part of your business into another? Like, what are some of the ways that you've organized that?
I just don't think we're good enough at it. We're working on it deliberately. We're trying to do it. What we see is that generally companies which are doing well, and we had Jim Simons of Renaissance Technologies in our offices not long ago. And I asked him, why are you so successful? And he said, well, it's because everybody in the firm knows what everybody else is doing. Is that the case in our company? No. Should it be that way? Yes. So you just have to work on all different types of information dissemination and see what works. Just working hard on it.
So you have an incredible, privilege of having one client in many ways, and being able to have this balance of return and social responsibility. If you looked at different kind of, corporates, you look at the Danone leadership basically got replaced for being too big on ESG, and a bunch of Exxon board members got kicked off for being too light on ESG. How should leaders manage this kind of tension, right? Because where you do have to make choices every year in a budget, and in many ways, everything costs money. What's your advice for leaders that are trying to balance that balance?
No, I think you have to be agile, and you have to listen, and you have to speak to your stakeholders. But at the end of the day, if it goes against your basic principles as a human being, you just need to leave, right? You can't run something you don't believe in. I think authenticity is unbelievably important. Otherwise, you get no credibility in the organization.
People often say, as CEO, you kind of have to shape the organization's values in your own kind of vision and image, so that you could be authentic about it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
One of the podcasts I did recently was with the CEO of Adidas. And he was very adamant on the fact that if you pretend to be somebody else at work, you burn out straight away. It's the biggest reason for burnout in a company, that you are not, yourself.
I love that. Authenticity happens to be one of my firm's values, so it's great. We'll finish off with a few rapid fire questions. If you don't like the question, you could say next. And no need to answer. But first question is, what is your most surprising pastime?
That I do in my spare time?
Yes.
Well, I'm a Scandinavian. I'm very big on sauna. I do sauna every day. You get great endorphins. You get out all the bad stuff, and ready to rock.
And in Scandinavia, you like whip yourself with the branches too.
Yeah,
you do that too?
You can.
Yeah.
Don't get carried away here.
You know what? I'm only picturing it. What is the most surprising investment you've made?
The worst investment I ever was part of was we invested in a company which lent money to poor people during the financial crisis, and it turned out to be accounting fraud and so on. And he brought the point to me that dubious business models attract bad people, and you just don't want to go there.
Are you a crypto believer or non?
No, I think it's worthless.
You think it's what?
Worthless.
Worthless. Tulips. What is your favorite book or movie?
A book. I read a lot of stuff, and I also did a degree recently in social psychology. So I love Adam Grant's work, and I think in terms of, both his kind of give and take concept of givers doing better than takers, but also the whole confident humility concept, that you need to be confident in what you do, but you need to be agile, and you need to be able to change your mind and question your beliefs.
And what author and book is that again?
Adam Grant.
Adam Grant.
Yeah.
Yes. Fantastic. Skiing or downhill skiing or cross country skiing?
Cross country.
What is your most
and downhill?
And what?
And downhill.
And downhill. You like both? Any biathlon? No. What is your most out of consensus belief today?
No, I don't think we're going to get any returns in financial markets for the next 5 to 10 years. I think it's going to be really, really dull. Really dull. We've never been in that situation for a very long time. I think it's going to be, a complete wasted decade. And by the way, I'm a genuine optimist.
So, ending on an optimistic thought, what do you view as your superpower?
I think it's to question my beliefs. I think that's important.
Well,
And I am a pretty optimistic guy. After all.
Well, Nicolai, great connecting with you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for making your trip to Montreal and Toronto. Sorry about that. And great seeing you.